for President Icahn and board members. Thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. I appear before you to respond to the statement of charges, and just as importantly, to ensure that the administrative record reflects what actually occurred. I wanted to begin with a simple factual point. In 3 years in this district, I was never evaluated, never warned, never placed on a performance plan, and never disciplined. To the contrary, I was promoted to Chief Administrative Officer in May of this year, just 4 months before being placed on administrative leave, and receiving consistently positive feedback from each superintendent I served and from members of this board, including text messages from Member Weisberg, such as BUSD would be a dumpster fire without you. That record matters, because what is before you tonight is not about performance. It's about retaliation. The sequence of events is undisputed. I reported illegal activity involving senior leadership. I raised concerns about Brown Act violations and potential FPPC violations. I filed a formal whistleblower retaliation complaint in July. In response, this board retained an independent investigator to examine my claims of whistleblower retaliation. More than 3 months before that investigation concluded, I was placed on administrative leave. On October 8th, board counsel informed me that the board was already prepared to terminate me for cause and attempted to negotiate a settlement agreement with me. This was long before any statement of charges had been issued and before I was ever asked a single question. Those charges were then sent to me during the Thanksgiving holiday while the district was closed. No reasonable observer could look at that timeline and conclude this process was impartial or free from retaliatory motive. Even setting retaliation aside, this process itself has been deeply flawed. Again, in 3 years, no evaluations, no warnings, no corrective action, and no opportunity to respond before termination was being discussed. On September 2nd, I was placed on administrative leave for what the district now characterizes as general performance concerns. In more than a decade as an education executive, I've never seen administrative leave used that way. Administrative leave is reserved for alleged egregious misconduct, threats to safety, or risk of evidence tampering. None of those existed here. None of those have been alleged here. What followed was not a meaningful investigation, despite being told that's why I was on administrative leave. Key witnesses were never interviewed. Former superintendents who could speak to my performance, since most of these allegations occurred when Dr. Macias was not my supervisor, were never contacted. This was not thorough, it was selective. My assistant and the assistant superintendent of business services who handled many of the tasks cited in the charge packet were never asked a single question. At the same time, I was denied access to my email and documents, the very records that would corroborate my communications, my diligence, and the inaccuracies in the charge packet. The result was predictable. I was denied access to I was deprived of the ability to fully participate in the whistleblower investigation and to prepare a complete defense to this charge packet. Even if the board believed every allegation in the charge packet, which I strongly dispute, the process used here still fails basic due process. Why have I not been given the opportunity to provide my evidence by being able to access my district emails and district documents? Again, some of these allegations are from 2 years ago when Dr. Macias wasn't even employed in the district. He does not know the conversation that took place and the direction I received from Dr. Cantwell. I have emails. I've requested through Mr. Sims the ability to put forward all the evidence in my case, and I've been denied that opportunity. I also need to provide some necessary medical context. For more than a decade, I have lived with ulcerative colitis, a serious chronic autoimmune disease, fully disclosed to each of my supervisors and documented with human resources. In recent months, this has meant multiple urgent care visits and emergency hospitalization just weeks ago. When I am ill, recovery takes longer. Stress and lack of sleep significantly increase the risk of a colitis flare or serious complications from infection that my compromised immune system cannot fight. Throughout June, July, and August, I properly reported my absences, used my leave lawfully, provided medical documentation when it was required, and several of the alleged performance issues occurred during periods when I was on approved vacation or documented medical leave. Using protected medical leave as a basis for discipline is not only unfair, it is unlawful. The district's recent disciplinary decisions have a troubling pattern. Employees directly involved in the largest fraud scandal in recent district history have been promoted. Individuals who ignored emails, withheld information, or contributed to delays faced no consequences. This pattern raised serious questions about consistency and fairness, yet I, who reported illegal activity, documented concerns, and followed the law, am the one now facing termination. These are administrative disputes. It's not employee misconduct. The charges against me fall into a few clear categories: tasks that were affected by conflicting board direction or superintendent decisions, legacy processes that predated my tenure, matters occurring while I was on an approved leave, responsibilities outside my job description, and actions taken or directed by the board itself. None of these constitute unprofessional conduct. None rise to the level of cause. And none were ever raised with me as concerns until after I engaged in protected activity. I deliberately am not walking through each allegation tonight because my 21-page written response and 220 pages of exhibits, which you received on December 10th, already did so. In summary, on page 2, and fully refuted with evidence in part 2 of my response. I do have an additional set. Again, I provided this to you electronically on the 10th. I provided you hard copies that were overnighted that were received by the district on the 11th, and here's one more set to ensure it's part of the record. These allegations are factually incorrect. None of the charges, individually or collectively, have merit. And even if they did have merit, they do not rise to the level of cause or justify bypassing due process. If these were genuine performance issues, they would have been addressed through evaluation, coaching, and clear expectations, not an immediate termination for cause. My record speaks for itself, which again I included in the packet you received last week, including letters of recommendation from former superintendent, assistant superintendent, directors, a board member, written praise from supervisors and board members, including texts from Dr. Karamo, such as, "I can't do this job without you, I need you." A promotion just months before these charges. A personnel file, again, with no discipline, no warnings, and no negative evaluations. That record cannot be reconciled with narrative in the statement of charges. One reflects reality, the other does not. I want to say this carefully and respectfully. Over the past several months, the district has experienced an unprecedented loss of senior leadership across human resources, business services, facilities, payroll, purchasing, and other core functions. And I'm told that more resignations were submitted this week and are on the immediate horizon. These are experienced, dedicated professionals. Their departures are not random. I raise this not to assign blame and not to advance my own interests, but because I care deeply about the stability of this district, regardless of what happens to me. These are challenging times, and I believe we all want the same thing: stability for our students, staff, and community. The loss of institutional knowledge and operational leadership has real consequences for students, staff, and this community. I also need to acknowledge one recent development since I sent my packet last week that the board should be aware of. 2 days ago, on December 16th, I received the district's written findings regarding my whistleblower retaliation complaint. I want to be clear about that timeline. On December 5th, the investigator emailed me requesting additional text messages and information. I responded the same day that I was happy to provide anything she needed and asked her to let me know which materials specifically would be helpful. I never received a follow-up. Instead, 11 days later, I received final written findings concluding the investigation. Findings that were issued just days before this hearing and more than 2 weeks after the statement of charges had already been served upon me. I'm not asking for the board to agree or disagree with those findings tonight. What I'm asking the board to consider is whether that process inspires confidence. An investigation that requests additional evidence, does not follow up, and then closes immediately before a termination hearing, while the subject of the complaint is denied access to his own emails and records, cannot reasonably be described as complete or fair. At a minimum, it underscores why proceeding with termination tonight is premature. Even if the board ultimately disagrees with me on the merits, acting before all relevant evidence is gathered and considered, it exposes the district to unnecessary legal risk and further undermines trust in this process. My request tonight is narrow and grounded in law. I ask the board to dismiss these charges and allow me to return to work so I can continue supporting Burbank students and staff through this challenging time. Alternatively, at a minimum, I ask that you defer any decision until all independent investigations are complete. Proceeding tonight before all the facts are gathered would be premature, expose the district to unnecessary legal risk, and undermine trust in our processes. By choosing fairness now, we protect not just one employee, but the integrity of this district we all serve. Thank you.